of Hollywood's nicest gentlemen and one of Hollywood's most familiar faces, Roddy McDowall.
On the morning of December 18th, 1974, federal agents knocked on the door of a quiet home in North Hollywood. Inside lived one of the most beloved men in show business, a former child star, a face America had welcomed into its living room almost every week. And behind a locked door in that house was something he had spent decades building in secret. The agents had a search warrant. By the time they left, they had carried out a fortune. This is the story of that vault, the raid that exposed it, and the one terrible day the man who kept all of Hollywood's secrets was forced to give them away. His name was Roddy McDowall. If you watched television in the 1970s, you knew his face without ever knowing the half of it. He sat in the squares on Hollywood Squares, quick and witty trading jokes with Paul Lynde and Charlie Weaver. He had been famous since he was a boy. He seemed to know everyone, and everyone seemed to adore him. He was the friend the whole town trusted. And that, in the end, is the heart of the mystery, because the most trusted man in Hollywood was hiding far more than anyone ever guessed. There were really two secrets inside Roddy McDowall. The first was the vault itself, a private archive of films and television gathered reel by reel at a time when the studios insisted that no one had the right to own such things. The second secret was Roddy himself, the private life he never spoke about, the truths he carried for his friends and never told a soul. He was a man defined by what he kept hidden. So when the law finally pried one secret open, it raised a far stranger question. What else was he keeping? And why did he of all people finally talk? To understand the secret, you have to go back to a frightened boy on a ship. Roderick Andrew Anthony Jude McDowall was born in London on September 17, 1928, the son of a Scottish merchant seaman and an Irish mother. When German bombs began falling on the city, his mother put him and his sister on a boat to America. He was barely 11 years old, leaving everything he knew behind. He arrived in a strange country, in the middle of a war, and almost at once that delicate, serious English boy walked onto a Hollywood soundstage and into one of the most famous films ever made. The film was How Green Was My Valley. Directed by John Ford, it won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and at its heart was young Roddy playing the youngest son of a Welsh mining family. Audiences fell in love with him. More roles followed fast. My Friend Flicka, Lassie Come Home, where he starred beside another child actor, a dark-haired girl named Elizabeth Taylor, beginning a friendship that would last the rest of their lives. By the time he was a teenager, Roddy McDowall was one of the most cherished child stars in the world. But child stars grow up, and growing up in Hollywood is where the danger begins. Most child stars do not survive the change. The cute boy becomes an awkward young man, and the offers dry up. Roddy refused to let that happen to him. At 18, he walked away from the safety of the movies and moved to New York to learn his craft on the stage. He played Shakespeare. He became a serious actor, not just a famous child. He became an American citizen in 1949. And slowly, deliberately, he rebuilt himself into something rare in that town. A child star who became a respected adult instead of a sad memory. The comeback had its cruel moments. In 1963, he played Octavian in the epic Cleopatra, a performance many thought deserved an Oscar nomination. But his own studio filed the paperwork incorrectly, listing him in the wrong category, and the nomination slipped away on a technicality. The studio was so embarrassed, it printed a public apology. Then came the role that made him a legend to a new generation. Beneath heavy ape makeup, Roddy McDowall became Cornelius and later Caesar in the Planet of the Apes films. By 1974, he was everywhere again, more popular than ever, and no one suspected what was behind his locked door. Here is the thing the public did not understand. In those years, there was no such thing as owning a movie. There were no home video stores, no streaming, no legal way to keep a film you loved. When a movie left the theater, it could vanish for years, sometimes forever. Studios threw old prints away. Television wiped its tapes to reuse them. To a man who loved film as deeply as Roddy McDowall did, this was a quiet tragedy unfolding all around him. So he began to collect. Reel by reel, tape by tape. He started saving the films that the studios themselves were letting die. He bought the home movies of the late Errol Flynn. He kept prints of Tam Lin, the one film he had directed himself, and copied them onto tape so they would last. He gathered the pictures of his own childhood, the Lassie films, the wartime classics. What he was building in truth was a private museum. But the law did not see a museum. The law saw stolen property. Copying or selling a studio's film without owning the rights was a federal crime. And Roddy McDowall's collection had grown into one of the largest of its kind in the country. It was a treasure. It was also evidence. By the time the agents came, the vault held 160 16mm prints and more than 1,000 video cassettes. Industry experts would later put its value at more than $5 million. The investigation did not begin with Roddy at all. It began with a known film bootlegger the government had been chasing for years. In a raid on another collector's home, agents found a list of films that Roddy McDowall was quietly trying to sell. His name was on a piece of paper, and once it was there was no taking it back. That November, the FBI asked him to come in for a talk. At first he was careful. He admitted he had bought films over the years. That was one thing. But when they asked whether he had ever sold films, he understood the trap closing around him. Selling was the more serious crime, and the evidence was already in their hands. Then on December 18, 1974, they stopped asking politely. The agents arrived at his North Hollywood home with a warrant and went straight for the vault. One by one, they carried his life's collection out the door. The secret was no longer a secret. Now, Roddy McDowall faced a choice that would haunt the rest of his quiet life. He could be prosecuted, dragged through the courts, his name in headlines, or he could cooperate. And cooperation meant something very specific. The government did not just want his films. They wanted names. They wanted him to tell them who else was buying and selling, who else had a vault like his. For most people, that would be a simple decision. But Roddy McDowall was not most people. He was the man who never told. The man entrusted with the deepest secrets in Hollywood, precisely because he could be trusted to keep them. He talked. In a long written statement to the FBI, Roddy McDowall named names. He told them that the singer Mel Torme collected films. He named the comedian Dick Martin. And he named one of the biggest movie stars in the world, a man guarding a painful secret of his own, the actor Rock Hudson. These were not strangers. These were peers. Some were friends. The man who had spent his life protecting other people's confidences had, under federal pressure, handed those confidences to the government. It was the one time the great secret keeper broke, and he would carry the weight of it silently for the rest of his days. In the end, the cruelty of it was almost unbearable. Roddy McDowall was never charged with anything. The others he named were never seriously pursued. All that pain, all that betrayal of his own deepest principle, and the law simply closed the file and walked away. He had given up his friend's secrets and his own peace of mind for a case that quietly evaporated. He never spoke about it publicly. Not once. The documents describing exactly what he said would stay hidden in a government file unseen by the public for the next 25 years. And what did Roddy McDowall do next? He went back to work. In the months right after the raid, he returned to the bright lights of Hollywood squares, smiling in his square trading jokes, as if nothing had happened. Week after week through 1975, America watched him laugh, never dreaming what he had just been through. It was perhaps the greatest performance of his life. Behind the easy charm, was a man who had just been forced to betray the one thing he valued most. The mask never slipped. It almost never did. To understand why the betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the other secret. The one inside Roddy himself. Roddy McDowall was a gay man at a time when that truth could end a career overnight. So he never said it out loud. Not in interviews, not in public, not ever. He lived a full private life with long relationships the world never saw. There is a bitter irony in it that is hard to ignore. One of the men he named to the FBI, Rock Hudson, was hiding the very same secret behind the very same kind of locked door. Two men, two closets in a town that punished the truth. And yet Roddy never became bitter and never became careless with anyone else's truth. He was by every account the most discreet man in Hollywood. He knew where all the bodies were buried, who loved whom, who was hiding what. Stars confided in him because they knew, absolutely knew, that he would take it to the grave. Late in life, when publishers waved money at him for a tell-all memoir, he refused. To sell his friends' secrets was simply not who he was. That refusal tells you everything. The FBI statement was not the real Roddy. It was the one moment the world bent him out of shape. Instead of writing about his friends, he photographed them. Roddy McDowall was a gifted photographer, and over the years he published several beautiful books of portraits, the most famous, called Double Exposure. In them are the faces of his friends: Elizabeth Taylor, Judy Garland, Katharine Hepburn, Lauren Bacall, captured with a tenderness only a trusted insider could earn. His home became a gathering place. For decades, he hosted legendary parties where the guests ranged from Bette Davis and Greta Garbo to young actors just starting out. He was the keeper of the flame, the one who held the whole community together. Through all of it ran the thread of Elizabeth Taylor. The dark-haired girl from Lassie Come Home stayed his closest friend for more than 50 years. Through her many marriages and her own storms, Roddy was the constant, the safe harbor, the friend who never wanted anything from her. That was the life beneath the fame. Not scandal, but loyalty. Not the headlines people imagined, but a quiet devotion to the people he loved. It is why the raid hurt so much. For a man whose entire identity was built on being trustworthy, being forced to inform was a wound to the soul. And here is where the story turns towards something like grace. The very thing that got Roddy McDowall rated his love of saving films became in time his greatest gift to the world. The collector the FBI once treated as a criminal grew into one of the most respected guardians of film history in America. He became a founding member of the National Film Preservation Board, representing actors in the fight to save the nation's movies until the day he died. The man punished for keeping films had been right all along. The films did need saving, and he helped save them. Within his beloved academy, he was elected again and again, serving 10 years on its board, and in his final year, becoming president of its foundation. He poured himself into charity, into the retirement home for old actors, where a rose garden would one day be named in his honor. By the late 1990s, Roddy McDowall had become something almost no one in Hollywood ever manages to be. A man with no enemies, beloved, trusted, and respected, not for the secrets he kept, but for the kindness he showed everyone. The boy from the Blitz had built a life of quiet, enormous decency. Then, in April of 1998, came the diagnosis. Cancer already spread throughout his body. Roddy McDowall had been a smoker most of his life, and now the bill had come due. He chose to face the end the way he had faced everything else. Privately, on his own terms, without drama. He stayed in his home in Studio City, cared for by a devoted friend, surrounded by the things and the people he loved. He planned every detail himself. There would be no spectacle, just the quiet closing of a long, extraordinary, carefully guarded life. On October 3, 1998, Roddy McDowall died at home. He was 70 years old. The friend who cared for him said simply that it was very peaceful, that it was exactly the way he had planned. Elizabeth Taylor, his friend of half a century, said she was shocked and grieving. All over Hollywood, people who had trusted him with their lives mourned the man who had never let them down. And then, a year later, the last secret slipped out. In 1999, the FBI's old files were made public, and the world finally learned about the day the great secret keeper had talked. But by then, it no longer mattered the way it once would have. The men he named were gone. What remained was the fuller picture of a complicated, deeply human life. A man who loved films enough to break the law to save them. A man who guarded everyone's secrets, including his own, in an age that gave him no choice. A man bent once by the weight of the law, who spent the rest of his life quietly proving who he truly was. Roddy McDowall took a great deal to his grave, and he carried all of it with grace.